2023, if you have a Ford Bronco from that model year, you might find in the back of the Bronco, you actually do have a subwoofer, or what looks like a subwoofer. So these cars weren't supposed to come with subwoofers, but if you pull off the rear trim panel, you're gonna find a subwoofer in there. Pull it out though, and you'll find out that the subwoofer itself is very light. There's no magnet, there's no coil on the subwoofer. On top of that, the little amp module next to it has a red X on it. There's actually no amp in there, it's just a metal case. Basically, these are just dummies. There's no electronics there, you've got half a speaker, none of it works. So why did Ford bother putting it in? To figure this out, let's jump back to 2022. In the middle of the year, Ford basically didn't have enough chips. Nobody did, the chip shortage was in full effect. Here's the thing, for the 2023 model year, Ford was planning to upgrade all the base Broncos to have a 7-speaker system, including a subwoofer in the back. Once it actually got time to start producing those in late 2022, it realized it didn't have the chips. It couldn't actually make these trucks as it intended. So they came up with a plan. Talk to the customers, tell them they can have $250 back and they're not getting a subwoofer. So far, so simple. You would assume then that Ford would just not put the subwoofer in the car, they would not put the amp, and those parts would just be missing from the vehicle. But that's not what actually happened. For some reason, Ford decided to actually put the sub in the back of the car, albeit with a speaker that had no coil, that had no magnet, and they put an empty shell of the amp in there. Why did they do this? Why did they put fake parts that still cost money to make in the truck when they could have just done nothing? We've talked to Ford, they haven't actually gotten back to us, but we do have some theories. Basically, the most likely situation seems to be that it was done for manufacturing reasons. Think about it this way, if Ford puts nothing in the back of the Bronco there, you've basically got a trim panel and the metal outside of the vehicle, there's nothing in between. The subwoofer was originally meant to be in there. That's going to have an effect on noise, vibration, and harshness. You could get a lot more road noise coming into the vehicle, especially because that sub is mounted directly above the rear wheel well. You can imagine if you've taken some plastic components out of there and a speaker, you're going to get a lot more noise from like rock chips under the vehicle, just general road noise coming through the vehicle. So there is number one reason, NVH. Putting nothing in where a subwoofer and an enclosure used to go, you know, it's probably going to cause problems. So best you sort of minimize the changes in that regard. Now, as for the amp, why would Ford put a empty amp shell with an unpopulated PCB into the vehicle? That's confusing. What I reckon is basically Ford needed somewhere for the cable on the harness to go. Ford was not about to change all the wiring harnesses, because that's just a huge engineering change, costs a lot of money. They probably had half the harnesses already manufactured, ready to go. You don't want to be making a special one-off harness for like 6 months of production. Terrible. But once you've got that connector hanging off the harness for the subwoofer, that connector has to go somewhere. Otherwise, it's just rattling around in the back of the car, banging on things. Again, noise, vibration, harshness, no bueno. So where does the connector go? Where's it meant to go? Well, it's meant to go into the amp. If you just take the amp PCB, populate the connectors, still screw it into the vehicle, plug the plug in, done. The connector's where it should be. You don't have to retrain any of your assembly workers. They're all still doing the same job. Basically, Ford just has to ring up a couple of suppliers, say, hey, you making the speakers? You know, like cut the magnets, just make them cheaper, but otherwise we'll still take them. Make another call, hey, you making our amps? Leave the components off, just make sure the connectors are there, you know, until we can get the chips, just rock it. That's my number one theory on what actually happened here. I'm hoping Ford actually confirms for me that that's the case, or they tell me another, even more interesting story. But that's what I reckon happened here. That's why if you got a 2023 Bronco, you've probably got a dummy sub and dummy amp in there. Even though they don't do anything, it was easier for Ford to do that than to scrap the components entirely. Here's the kicker. Because Ford left almost everything in there, including the sub enclosure, it's actually not that hard to go ahead and put a sub back in there. If you just put in a real subwoofer and you buy the amp from the Ford Fusion, screw it in, plug it in, and then you just flash something in the infotainment system, you've got a working sub and your Bronco goes from a 6-speaker to a 7-speaker system. And it's improved. It's how it should have been from the factory. I don't know why Ford didn't want to do a retrofit campaign. I think they just wanted to save money, keep it simple. They basically said, here's your $250. We're never putting a sub in these. But they don't care if you do it yourself, seems like. So if you want to do that, you can look up any number of tutorials on YouTube on how to put a sub back in your 2023 Bronco. And I've included a few links in the description as to that methodology. In any case, that is why Ford put just nonsense components in the back of the 2023 Bronco. I've been Rainbow Default, aka TK. See you next time.